Hi, everybody. It's Steve Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, we got a couple of subjects that have been sent my way by Chris Gloss. And I know he's traveling today, so he might be able to join us to listen in on it, but I think he's midair right now. So anyway, he sent over a couple of things that I think you guys are going to find quite interesting to play with a little bit. So some merging of brilliance will be happening. So with that, let's go ahead and get into it. The first one has to do with a model he sent over about motivating people, and this is by Susan Fowler. Anytime I see that the foreword was written by Ken Blanchard, I do sort of assume that she is somehow connected with him, whether she's on staff or whether she's one of the consultants that he works with, his organization works with. There's been a lot of books that have come out of the Blanchard organization. And so this particular one, Why Motivating People Doesn't Work and What Does. So the New Science of Leading, Energizing, and Engaging. So you guys can get that book if you feel so inclined. But inside of it, Chris sent over a diagram. And you guys know the moment we see a diagram, our big question is, does this overlay on the change grid? How would that overlay? Let's take a closer look. And so we're going to take a nice close look at this spectrum of motivation and see what we can deduce just from what we're actually looking at on here. Now, before we get into that, I'd like to reacquaint you guys with what we already know about motivation. So the first thing that, yeah, Shag can say looks more like it would map on the master stream. It may very well, but we'll see how that all pans out. So in the book I wrote long ago about master stream, in fact, I said that I had a comment about motivation. And my comment about motivation was that motivation is not a cosmetic that we blindly apply to some superficial flaw. It cannot be found in a book or on a tape that tells you how long ago this thing was written, or in the rah-rah energizing words of a paid performer. True motivation comes from three things, and that is when you have the skill that is necessary to produce the outcome that you are looking for in increasingly difficult situations. Those are the three criteria for this motivational formula to actually come to be. So let's dissect that a little bit. The first thing that I said is that when you have the ability to produce the outcomes that you are looking for. So trying to motivate somebody to do, somebody else's goal and somebody else's outcome who's going to walk away with a lion's share of the benefit, good luck. But if you can help employees to recognize that on the way to meeting their own goals, they will, by default, meet the company goals. So how can we help people to develop the skills that are necessary to produce the outcomes that they are looking for in increasingly difficult situations? And so I said, now, if we just focus on the first two, something is going to come into play. So let's say that I do make sure that all of you have the skills that it takes to produce the outcomes that you are looking for. That sounds really nice, doesn't it? But the question becomes, how sustainable is that? For how long will that work? I'm just going to keep giving you more and more skills to help you reach the outcomes you're looking for.
Recording in progress.
Oh, I'm being recorded.
Isn't that nice?
Oh, very nice.
Well,
Yeah.
the skill itself has to support something that is trying to do, right? Or in other words, it's not a lone actor whenever we're talking about any behavior.
Yeah, right. And I think part of what it is that we're really looking at here is it true that if you keep on giving someone a little bit of motivation, they'll keep doing whatever it is? We just need to keep giving them this dose of motivation, and this dose of motivation will continue to produce the outcome it initially did for the foreseeable future. Do you guys agree with that? Disagree with that? Is that nonsense? Is that flawed?
I disagree. I think that's flawed.
Okay, tell us about it. Yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, disagree, because me or they, whoever, has to want, you've talked many times about wanting whatever it is going forward. So even if I have the skill set, if I don't really want or care about it, it really doesn't matter. I'll just let those skills lay fallow.
Mhm.
And I also need to have enough tension around that situation to keep me moving forward.
Yep. Absolutely true.
And
And
plus, those
so,
things are fleeting, right? So when we're talking about these things where people say satisfaction, there's no satisfaction in the work. Well, these are things that are fleeting. They're meant for you to cultivate a rhythm. That's why I like that self-regulation and psychological needs
yep,
that's on this thing here, because those things aren't, um, they're not static, they're dynamic. And so they play itself out in the context of how things are lived out. And if variables change, then so could your motivation change.
mm-hmm. And so, basically, if we go back to the programs that I was doing for my biggest client on motivation, I think it just resonates with what you guys have already been learning or teaching about motivation for the past, umpteen years. And that's that if you have to keep on motivating somebody to do something, you've just created a situation that in the long run is untenable. It's not scalable. If you have to constantly give them that dose, just like a drug, then you have to keep administering it. That's putting a burden on you. So we need to look at the difference between internal or intrinsic motivation versus external or extrinsic motivation. If we're relying on extrinsic motivators, this is not a sustainable model for motivating people. On the other hand, if we can find a way to help people get those intrinsic motivators to be brought into play and ultimately satisfied, we have a far more sustainable kind of a situation that's waiting for us. And so I get it. We have to give people the ability, the skill, the resources necessary to produce whatever these outcomes happen to be. But unless we do something to make sure that challenge continues to increase, so we said in increasingly difficult situations, if we don't have that element there, they're going to slip down grid. And if I just said to you, let's take a look at a change grid, you tell me where people are motivated and where they're not so motivated. So I don't think people are all that motivated down in apathy.
Right.
I mean, they might be going on autopilot, and that might be fine for achieving a certain level of performance, but I dare say we would not describe that person as being motivated. So likewise, I think if we apply those external motivators, we're moving people upgrade. External motivators could be expectations for performance accompanied by threats for failure to meet those motivators. And so I don't think that's really motivations we're talking about. We're saying, no, we need somebody who finds within themselves what it takes to be able to get on track, stay on track, and ultimately reach whatever that desired outcome happens to be. And so where's that? That's going to be more outgrid. So we already know that from what we've looked at on the change grid. Let me throw something else into that. And that is this heart line that we talk about. If you think about Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow, flow is really not so much talking about motivation per se, but it is talking about accomplishing things, the ease with which we're accomplishing things, just this kind of channeling of our energy in such a way that we're getting where we want to go, and we don't even feel that the emotion is even happening. It's like it's just this automatic kind of self-generated impetus for something to be moving forward. So this idea about flow, we've talked about extensively as well. So we would certainly say that flow is giving us a reinforcement of our belief that true motivation is going to be something that's more outgrid, not the danger zone. I hope I don't need to always throw in that little disclaimer, but we understand we're talking about outgrid. We're talking about this healthy area of outgrid out here. By the way, even if you're in a danger zone, you can still be profoundly motivated. You're just motivated for evil, controlling, manipulative sorts of things. So maybe I should say, oh no, you're still motivated, but you've turned to the dark side. So when we take what we know about perceived challenge and perceived ability, we look at that kind of a situation, and we then look at flow to kind of reinforce it. I think we're on track when it comes to where motivation actually happens. Do you guys agree with that? Disagree with that?
Yeah, I was gonna say I thought it was, at least in my mind, it seems like a heartline experience across a
Mhm.
continuum, right? Because
Yep.
again, it starts out, something piques your interest and you can get motivated in that, and you can build momentum over time that lends itself to the kind of sustainability you need for a particular
Mhm.
outcome. Because otherwise, you're just going to get burnt out. And so
Well,
you have to be
exactly.
able to account for some kind of expenditure, and it becomes this learning process along the way too.
Yep, yep,
Uh,
yep.
at
Well,
least that's what I see.
right. Remember, outgrid people find the energy. They are the
Mhm.
energy. Again, forget the danger zone, but they are the energy. Where it's like upgrid people are experiencing a whole lot of energy, but it's chaotic. And, it's very difficult to stay focused on something when you're this far upgrade, particularly if you tell me, get the job done or you're fired. Am I more motivated by doing the work or by keeping my job? Am I more focused on getting the work done, or am I more focused about what's going to happen if I lose my job? And why the heck do I work here anyway if people are going to be threatening me? So, you got all this stuff going on up here that isn't really supporting
That's an
motivation.
energy leak.
No, it's right. It's chaotic, lots of energy. And you go downgrade, there's just not a whole lot of energy that's down there to begin with. So, and again, you guys feel free to unmute and chime in on any of this you want to, but let me kind of throw the diagram that we shared. And so this is the spectrum of motivation. I'll zoom in as best I can here. I will tell you that I was able to do some secondary research and find out about what these definitions of these different things along the spectrum may be. And I understand optimal and suboptimal, but if we look at their axes, psychological needs versus self-regulation needs, I can see where I could say that they're being met versus not being met. But I don't understand what these words high quality and low quality mean, and I've been unable to find anything to be able to do that. And quite candidly, I don't feel like buying the book. So sooner or later someone's going to write a review and they're going to tell us what high quality versus low quality is. And I think that's Chris who's phoned in for the thing, but again, if he's up in the air, he's just listening in on what's going on. So Chris, you're welcome to do whatever you want, but I don't know what they mean by high quality and low quality. But what I can certainly do is say, well, if I just overlay this on the change grid, I might be able to figure out what they mean by low. And now to Brian's point, feeling like this maps to the heart line. Well, obviously I would need to rotate this diagram some 45 degrees clockwise in order to make this fit. And that would then mean the disinterested would be very far in grid. And as we move out grid, going to external, then the imposed, aligned, integrated, now quite far out grid, but keep in mind, we've moved off of the heart line. If you can see that, we're still darn close to it, but nevertheless, we're not sitting on top of the heart line anymore. And then this idea about inherent takes a turn. So we'll save inherent for just a couple of minutes before we get into this one. But let's look at these that would plot on or darn close to the heart line. Now, there is a little thing I found. Oop, got to shrink down to see it. And these are definitions on what these different motivational stops along the spectrum actually look like. Now, for some reason, they are using attending a meeting as being the subject about which you may be motivated or not motivated to do that. So if you are disinterested, it is suboptimal. Okay, fine, we'll look at that in a second. You simply could not find any value in the meeting. It felt like a waste of time, adding to your sense of feeling overwhelmed. Now, that's going to throw a little bit of a wrench into the discussion, but nevertheless, I think they're doing something after the fact. So we're going to determine if I was motivated after the fact, or the meeting didn't leave me motivated felt like a waste of time. I could have also said, how motivated am I to go to this meeting? So it may very well be that a long pattern of having worthless meetings sets me up to kind of not be interested in attending because there's never been any value in all the other meetings. And so, yeah, I'm already going into it knowing or predicting that it's going to be a total waste of time. It's distracting me from other things I might want to be doing. So there could be that feeling of being overwhelmed, but mostly I'm just plain not interested. So does that feel like that would resonate energetically with the in-grid side of things? And that's going to be the question we're going to look at. If we look at how it would map to flow, we would say that the flow that's occurring at someone who's disinterested would be minimal amounts of water traveling at minimal amounts of speed. I might very well be on the heart line. There might be some flow going on. After all, even though I'm disinterested, if I look at their definition, I apparently attended the meeting anyway. And so, yeah, so what's my ability to get something valuable out of the meeting? Low. How challenging is it going to be? Not very challenging. There I am in grid, going through the motions. Now, do keep in mind before you guys share comments with me is that when you're in this in-grid quadrant, or what I'm learning from working with ChatGPT on its image processing, is that you cannot use the word quadrant to describe something once it's been tilted. The ChatGPT is completely confused by trying to absorb the thought that just because we've tilted it into this form, that it's still a quadrant. Now, you guys, I'm sure, have plenty of intellectual flexibility and ability to juggle all this. Unless, so I finally said to ChatGPT, you obviously are struggling to recognize what I'm looking at here as being a quadrant. So how would you describe a square rotated 45 degrees? Does anybody want to tell me what that shape is actually called? Anybody? It's actually, I thought diamond, they said, no, diamonds have to be skewed. It's actually called a rhombus. And I thought a rhombus was a very different kind of a thing. I thought a rhombus had to be like two sets of parallel lines. And no, ChatGPT corrected me and said that's a parallelogram. And so I went like, okay, fine. So if you are ever playing with images inside of ChatGPT, just know that one of the things I discovered right away was
rhombus is a parallelogram
what it's a parallelogram
with
right.
opposite equal acute angles.
Right. But it says that if all the four angles are equal, it is a rhombus. And I'm like, fine, if you want to call that the outgrid rhombus. And once I did that, it's completely happy.
But your parallelogram has equal sides, which is a square.
Right. But it's this idea about it actually taking the fourth thing.
Tilt.
You get to a certain point with ChatGPT that you realize the training that it has received is what's going to rule the day.
Yeah.
And to a certain degree, inside of a chat. Oh, Chris is on the call. Yay, Chris. It'll do that. Just kind of know this. If you see, maybe I'll show you a little bit later, the chats I've been having with ChatGPT, it is at the point now where I can give it any coordinate pair and it can give me a detailed reading through 5 of the layers.
Wow.
A very impressive one. That is activity specific. So
Wow.
I can say, this is the activity. This is where the person is plotting. Tell me what's going on with that person. And ChatGPT can do it very effectively. Very effectively. So that's getting us to a next generation of thought about what to do. But nevertheless, you got to call it a rhombus. It will not call it the outgrid quadrant. It calls it the outgrid rhombus. So be it. Yeah. All right. Anywho, let's see. Chris says that he can't talk. He's traveling, but he's listening. And so, Chris, we're actually looking at the motivational model that you sent over a while back. And so I could certainly say to you that as this a disinterested external impose would be laying on the in-grid quadrant along the heart line. So we're going to have to look at these axes, but this would make sense. So let's go to the second definition, and that's if you go from being disinterested, move a little bit further out grid on the heart line, or flow a little bit more. Now the meeting provided an opportunity for you to exert your position or power. It enabled you to take advantage of a promise for more money or an enhanced status or image in the eyes of others. Now, to me, this feels like it would be someplace very different along the change grid. Is it just me, or does this feel more like a driver sort of motivation?
Hmm.
You know, you're looking for that outcome, whether it's money or status or increased image or whatever.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Kathy.
definitely driver. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Mhm.
feels to me a lot more driver oriented. However, if I do overlay it as we've been talking about, it would still be very much in that driven, amiable side of things. So maybe that's just an opportunist kind of a thing. They don't really are trying out here actively, politically building whatever, but there's some of that energy that's happening. I can make room for that because of that secondary driver energy. Oh, and again, ChatGPT fully understands primary, secondary, and tertiary energies. If I say, what if you're on the border between two of these secondary energies? What would happen there? It just starts talking about a blend. So I'm telling you, it's a very good student. So, okay, so now you look at the next one. They're calling it an imposed motivational outlook. Hmm. You feel pressured because everyone else was attending and expected the same from you. You are avoiding feelings of guilt, shame, or fear from not participating.
Hmm.
That feels very Ingrid to me.
Feels
Mhm.
very Ingrid to me, but when it starts talking about the guilt and the shame and wanting to actively avoid something, that feels a little bit higher levels of challenge, but maybe they
Mhm.
still had the ability to kind of address that. So although it is far from perfect, I can kind of see how those three may very well map along the heart line. Now, when you get further out grid, huh, let's see what's happening now. The next one would be aligned. And what they're saying for aligned motivation outlook, you are able to link the meeting to a significant value, such as learning what you might learn or what others might learn from you. Now, that resonates very much with what's happening here on the change grid. So if I look at some of the other layers, again, I'm going to
Sounds
rely
like
on.
awareness has been peaked.
Yeah, and we're talking about learning. We know that learning happens when there is a higher level of challenge and there is a perceived level of ability, because learning is about gaining whatever that knowledge, skill, or experience might actually be about that situations. So I can kind of feel that that's happening here. Learning also to me has an analytical element. So rather than it slipping upgrade, it may very well be slightly downgrade, because again, if we look at how it's plotting, it is not on the heart line. Now, if I did a strict rotation 45 degrees, this would be a little bit upgrade. And that's when I said, wait a second, let's take a look at these axes and see which one goes where. And so when I think about self-regulation, and if I'm experiencing high quality self-regulation, what's that telling me about ability? Does that feel like, oh no, I'm really saying I've got the strong ability to regulate myself or my situation or whatever it is. I'm involved in running whatever my part of the show happens to be. I can do this quite well for myself. To me,
Mhm.
that maps more to perceived ability, where I think about
Right.
psychological needs being addressed or having high quality. I'd have to ask what they mean by high quality psychological needs. I know, Chris, you can't talk, but if you can type something, I don't know if this is something you've read in the book or whatever, but I would be very curious to know what how they define high quality psychological needs. Anybody want to throw something out? what you think high quality psychological needs might mean? Hmm.
I
Maybe,
don't know. Let's say talking about like what Maslow's
yeah.
the
So our higher
self actualization, I think it was called, or I think
yeah,
there was even a higher order beyond self actualization to self transcendence or something
yeah,
to
that
that
was
effect.
added.
They called
That's,
it.
I don't think that was Maslow
Yeah.
started, but yeah, I mean, something is at the top of that pyramid. And I think if we look at spiral dynamics and see what's going on in that particular area, there is what do I want to say? It's not so much that there's higher quality psychological needs, but there are higher level psychological needs, are more advanced, more evolved, more whatever it may be, and the low quality. So my issue, I guess, is really with the word quality. But nevertheless, I could see how that would map to the challenge side of things. If psychological needs are about moving ourselves to that next level of satisfying those psychological needs, I think that would certainly parallel with challenge. Because obviously I'm going after something I haven't gone after before. I'm trying to advance to the next level. So can you guys make room for that fitting, or you got questions, comments?
So I'm wondering when they're talking about these high psychological needs, in relation to the self-regulation, because I remember doing the training, you referenced control as regulation,
Yeah.
right? And so, like we're going to uh, uh, regulate or control the temperature in a room, you have to regulate the thermostat, right? And
Yep.
so I'm that's kind of like what comes to mind to me when I'm seeing this. So like if you have these high psychological needs in terms of getting or attaining self-actualization,
Mhm.
it's there's a deeper level of control that is needed in terms of your emotional intelligence and how you're
Mhm.
managing the physical and the mental and emotional. And so maybe
Yeah,
that's what they're talking about, I guess.
I think that's resonates very well, Kathy.
Yeah,
Daniel,
I
do
was
you
just
have
going to
something to add?
comment on what Brian said. That would make sense to me, Brian, if the word quality wasn't there.
Mm, yeah, because like
Uh,
who defines that, right?
Who defines and what does quality mean? I mean, if this is about controlling, which makes sense, regulating your emotional needs,
Hmm.
then it would be high and low,
Mm.
not
Right.
not not high quality, low quality. High quality just lends a whole other kind of. I think it muddies the water, whatever that means. But but
Well,
but yeah.
let's see. Chris just chatted this over. This is a link. In fact, let me go ahead and share it with all of you guys if you want to have some local access to this. So I will chat over to everyone this very link. And so this is Fowler's own work. And so thank you, Chris, for finding this and sending this. So you don't find any value in it. There's an external reason. You feel pressure, want to avoid pain, blah, blah, blah. Okay. You simply enjoy performing. Okay, this is all good. That maps. But let's see what the definition of quality means.
Yeah, the three psychological needs there: autonomy, relatedness, competence.
Right. Where are you seeing those?
At underneath the spectrum of motivation
There we are. Yeah.
model.
Autonomy. The three psychological needs she's referring to are autonomy, okay, relatedness, competence, the feeling of being effective at meeting everyday challenges, the need to care or be cared about by others. So these are all to me resonating with challenge. So because I'm trying to develop that autonomy, I'm trying to accomplish this care thing, I'm trying to increase my level of competence. So this at least feels like there's a goal, a stretch, a growth kind of opportunity that is there. Um, Still don't know what the word quality really means. Fowler goes on not only sharing evidence of engaging stories, but also how to help. Um, yeah. Oh, that's an interesting
Hmm.
sound. Oh, I love the sound. Who is that? Oh, all right. Okay, anyway, so yeah, I've just
So
yeah, go ahead, Tim.
yeah, I'm looking at a book review And they're talking about these psychological needs, although to our question, they aren't really defining the quality piece.
Yeah.
But in here, the author is saying the points that are being made here in the book is that there's three of them. One, you must satisfy all three of these needs, not just some.
Yep.
And we just talked about those three. Once satisfied, we want even more. For example, there is no point of ultimate satiation.
Yes.
Three, if all three needs are satisfied, we will naturally reach a state of high performance. So in my mind, it seems that they're using this quality to talk about performance from a competence standpoint and our ability to
Right.
maximize on that.
Yeah, and remember, we look at performance as being the predicted outcome of the right combination of perceived challenge and perceived ability. So I think this is mapping very, very well.
Well, the other interesting thing about that is in this book review, they're referring to these as six mental states that one finds themselves in.
Interesting.
I thought that was interesting. So, so when we talk about the energy piece, that to me.
Yep. Okay, let me slide this out of the way. Again, we still have a mystery about why high quality, what's quality got to do with it? So I'd like to see that. All right, so now, again, I think that these are going to map, but it sounds like self-regulation would end up going on the mapping to the ability axis, and the psychological needs would map to the challenge axis. I'm okay with all that. So that would mean that being aligned would be ever so slightly lower than the heart line, and as would integrated. So let's take a look at the definitions for align, or rather integrated. Yeah, oops, get back to where I clicked. Integrated motivational outlook. You were able to link the meeting to a life or work purpose, such as giving voice to an important issue in the meeting. And then the inherent motivational outlook, you simply enjoy meetings and thought it would be fun. Now, they are saying that if you are aligned, integrated, or inherent, then you are one of these optimal options on the spectrum of motivation, but disinterested, external, and imposed is suboptimal performance. All right, so let me just check in. Are you guys able to visually rotate this or conceptually rotate this and overlay it on the change grid? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
otherwise
just
yeah.
not comfortable, but yeah, I can. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can do this part. That I can do, but I need the mirror image. I need it flipped vertically.
Yeah, it's not about seeing it. It's about it's about having it really make sense when you throw in the.
I would agree. And by the way, I imagine that this diagram we're looking at is they obviously do a scatter pattern when they're trying to assess all of the people on a team, what their level of motivation is, and each one of these people are plopping wherever they happen to be plopping. I think it's pretty interesting that they're not plopping over here, they're not plopping down here. So what is here? Is it no motivation, lack of motivation? I feel like those areas need to be addressed. If you're going to give me something that takes the form of a grid, even though you want to call it a spectrum, you got to help me see the whole picture. So I don't know what's going on here yet, but nevertheless, these things are plotting along a bit of the change grid, now, or sorry, the heart line. Now, again, it doesn't go into the in-grid danger zone, and I don't believe it goes to the out-grid danger zone. This is all happening inside of that red circle. So going across, and some of it's going to be a little bit downgrid, some's a little upgrid. And let me look at Fowler's more simple explanations. Fowler would say that the aligned, and again, just put this one slightly below the heart line. And again, this isn't going all the way out to the extremes. This would be that would be 2-2, and this over here would be 10-10. So it's more on the inside. That would mean this would be an amiable driver, maybe even an analytical amiable driver. So aligned as you were able to link the task to a significant value. That to me feels as though something analytical has occurred. I'm not very far out grid or not, so I can kind of feel that that analytical energy has been brought in to modify that. Integrated would actually then be plotting quite strongly as an analytical driver. And the analytical driver, or the integrated motivational outlook, she says, you are able to link the task to a purpose. So that feels like an analytical driver kind of thing, maybe even a bit more of a, this would be a driven analytical driver.
Can I comment here, T, on that?
Yeah, please.
The definition of the integrated piece to me still contains a heart component around purpose. Anytime you're talking about purpose,
yep,
generally some kind of heart, some amiable,
So yeah, maybe that would, if I flipped it over and really did the overlay. And again, I don't know how precise they were trying to be when they did this, but we try to do things pretty precisely. I definitely know it would be down that analytical driver sub-quadrant, sub-rhomboid, rhombus, but maybe it would be right on top of that amiable tertiary energy. And that would then resonate with your thought that there's a heart element that's coming involved here.
Would that be right on the line to include? Trying to see in my mind.
It's like right around here.
Because integrated, the word to me, like comes from a root word meaning whole. So you're combining a lot of different things at that point. That's that linking perspective, but you can go and optimally in the direction of you need to go. And I think that's where that inherent comes, because then that is really signifying like a level of mastery that incompetent or the competence has increased. Like the mastery level where you go from being unconscious and incompetent to unconscious competency.
Yep.
Because it's inherent now, so it's a solid pattern that you can now operate in. So that's kind of what
right. So yeah, but let's look at what they're actually saying. That inherent motivational outlook really is: you simply enjoy performing the task.
Right. So you can enjoy it for enjoyment's sake and not have it, deal with the external kinds of things.
So that feels slightly expressive to me. That feels right up there. Yeah,
exactly, slightly right around here. And if I look at it again, if we did the mirror flip of this, inherent is actually more upgrid than the aligned and integrated would be. Again, you got to flip this thing. That moves upgrid, and I think it would overlay right on top of that expressive driver kind of subquadrant.
And T, here's what the book review author says. The latter three outlooks are the ones the author suggests are optimal and will tend to lead to greater feelings of personal well-being and in turn, better performance.
Yep, that resonates perfectly because, I mean, look, what they're actually saying is that if you want people to be motivated, there has to be a reasonable level of challenge involved. They have to have the ability necessary to meet those challenges. Now we've got a motivated person who's actually performing. I even think one of them talked about engaged. Right here's the engagement ring. So here's awareness, but I think everything we've talked about, whether it was the aligned or the integrated or the inherent, these are all in that same vicinity about the engagement. The intention and the engagement, and maybe even a little bit of execution.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. I just have a question about how you all would distinguish aligned from integrated. I mean, integrated to me has that heart component, that wholeness that Brian was talking about. Alignment is like lines coming together. So it feels more analytical to me. I don't know where what the actual difference is in someone's performance between aligned and integrated according to them. I mean, I can create it myself in my own mind, but I'm just curious what other people feel.
That's a good question.
Let me throw in to the discussion that in Fowler's definition, she said that aligned is you are able to link the task to a significant value that you hold, where integrated is you are able to link the task to a purpose. So that might be, are we saying that purposes live further out grid than values do? I don't know why they chose these words aligned and integrated and inherent, because it might very well be that we would simply use a different word to describe it. But when I think that I can get a group of people aligned to our values or the value of what's going on, C value, I think I'm a step in the right direction as far as that alignment goes. But the moment it connects to a purpose, now we're going somewhere. Now we're doing something that's a little more deliberate.
Yeah,
And I think when it's aligned, Kathy, I think there's still a degree of independence.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Versus when we get to that integrated stage.
Kathy,
say more. I don't get that. I don't understand what you're saying.
Well, if one is aligned with the organization's values and goals, I'm still independent in my purpose. But there may be some similarities that I find between what I value and what the organization values. But I may not be totally integrated. That integration may be the next stage, which it looks like what this model is suggesting. But when I'm aligned, I'm moving in that direction towards integration, but I may never get there. But aligned simply means I maintain my independence, what my value, and, when we talk about career management with organizations and individuals, that oftentimes is what I see going on, is sometimes it just does not match up. It doesn't mean that the folks can't continue to participate in that organization. They can, because they have found some degree of alignment between what they value and believe in. But at some point, they begin to separate from the organization and its culture and values, or they move further towards integration. And moving into integration means I may have to give up some of what I hold on to, in order to integrate into that entity or into that environment. And I think that's what happens with integration. There is that matter of control that we talk about around what am I willing to give up, what am I willing to gain, and that's what happens when you begin to integrate. There are pluses and minuses.
Yeah, interesting. We're getting a lot of background chatter, but Daniel, you got your hand up. What would you like to throw in? Yeah, Daniel, we can't understand what you're saying. It's very high pitched and fast. So if you want to type something over, I'll be happy to share it with the whole group, or we can chat it over to everyone. Everyone will see it, but we can't hear you quite right. Yeah. Okay, so let me throw this out to build on what Tim was saying, and then Kathy, I would love to hear if this is helping Tim's definition and what I'm throwing in. I do think that if I was a driven, amiable driver, I'm still primarily a driver. I'm trying to get things done, but that amiable component in the secondary position is really about the things I hold near and dear. So this is really filled with values, particularly values as far as other people are concerned, how this applies to other people as well. So I can see where that might match, and maybe that resonates with the company's values or whatever. Remember right there, that same spot we're talking about, I'm still in engagement. And to Tim's point, it may very well be that as we move from aligned to integrated, because integration seems to focus more on the task that achieves or leads to the purpose being fulfilled, I might very well have to set aside certain values, or I may have to magnify certain values in order to get the job done. That's also still inside of the engagement band. But I would think that would be the only difference I can think of. And then last thing I'd like to say before I throw it back to you guys is do keep in mind that according to this model, all three of those are optimal. Now, maybe they're saying, but if I'm going to use their little arrow correctly, they would say that integrated is actually more optimal than inherent. So I don't know if they're trying to say that there's a scale of optimality, if that's a word, start using it often. But I think they're just saying, look, all of these work, and these three don't work. So these are suboptimal. Disinterested, though, would seem to be the least optimal. If I wanted to say this really is a scale, but if we're going to say that's what they're saying, then they're actually saying that inherent is less optimal than integrated when it comes to performance. Oh yeah, okay, Daniel's got his hand up. Let's go ahead. Yeah, Daniel, go right ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry about that. I switched microphones. There's a couple of things about this that I wanted to just say, and that is number one, thank you for mentioning that the watercolor design is scatter plots.
Yes.
And as a result of that, these heat maps is basically what we've got here in these various areas that have been described in this book. Appear to me, again, inside of the red circle, and that the what is it, self-regulation has a lot
Self-regulation, yeah, would be down here for paralleling ability for us. Yeah.
for us, yeah. But that the self-regulation, yes, is about ability. It's about the use of ability.
Ah, very good.
Right. The reason that those other areas are blank is nobody plotted there. So my curiosity is what produced plots.
Yeah, it's interesting. What is the assessment tool that led to this scatter pattern? Because I'm just surprised. You would think that in any population, I mean, look at how many circles there are. This is a huge population. You'd think somebody would be up here and somebody would be down here.
And if I may,
yeah,
see the integrated inherent, aligned are really interesting to me because the plot generally follows the heart line as you suggested, moving back and forth, and the aligned is very interestingly placed to be just really great for getting things done and being able to work with others. But the integrated to me is where all of those other things have all been integrated into the person that they're operating on their own at peak performance. Whereas the inherent, a little something got lost. There's a little more enjoyment of self in the process, and productivity is not the highest value.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation because when I looked at what they said for inherent motivational outlook, you simply enjoy performing the task. Well,
exactly.
The motivation then is inherent, but now is it really just task specific? And maybe this whole model is task specific, which makes me happier, by the way. But maybe that's just it. Hey, they happen to have a task to be done that they just bottom line like doing.
Yeah, I mean, this is to me, what we're missing in our context is the set of assumptions that they are making, and performance. As we have to assume that performance to some end is really what this is about, which is why inherent kind of looks offline. So it's not. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Daniel was saying. What concerns me is just a lot of the missing context as we try to, because we're trying to fill in the blanks here. And what we don't have is a set of clear assumptions about what this model is really based on. It feels like it's based on the alignment of individual and organizational performance, which leads to achievement of purpose, but I guess that's the assumption we're bound to make without any more data.
I would
I
agree.
agree with that, Kathy.
Exactly. Me
Now,
too.
let me also throw this out, and this would I want, while this is going to be a criticism, I want you all to know that it comes from a very strong heart spice. I hold Ken Blanchard and everyone associated with him in rather high esteem. But when I look at this model, I go, this is just, if anything, too simple to really be telling the kind of story that we're used to being told when looking at a change grid. And so, yeah, it overlays on the change grid. And again, we always say when we're looking at any new model, particularly one that takes a graphic form, we want to know, does this overlay on the change grid? If so, how? And then if it overlays, we want to go, well, what does it add to our knowledge base as far as what the change grid is all about? And what does the change grid add to it? And so I think that what they're doing when it comes to abilities, they're focusing in on a single ability, self-regulation. So rather than the broad spectrum of ability, it's really is the self-regulation kind of thing. So you can be the boss of your own boss, you've got the skills necessary. And the psychological needs is about going after whatever your stage you're at. So do I want to be recognized? Do I want to be successful? Whatever. And again, this doesn't stretch to the danger zones. You'd have to like draw a vertical line to know how far out we'd actually be. So I guess I'm saying is the criticism that, as is far more often the case in the world of human development strategies, tools, techniques, programs, the ones that are most successful are the ones that are really simple. And that's what they're doing. They're just trying to take a very complex thing, motivation, and they're trying to show the world in a short book that this is really pretty simple, straightforward stuff. And we can give you some basic strategies on how to move people from one level to the next to the next. I'm sure it's just a bunch of outgrid maneuvers, maybe a little bit of upgrade and downgrade, as the case may be. So yeah. The thing for me is that I know that what we've put together for the change grid is going to give whoever cares about motivation a lot more useful information than this one little book or tool or approach may give. That doesn't take anything away from this thing. I just never found simplicity interesting. So it's not enough for me. And so perhaps my downfall is that rather than just try to take one little piece out of the full body of what we know about tension management, I've instead go, no, let's make it deeper and richer and all that sort of stuff. So good for them, but I don't think I'm looking at anything that's going to revolutionize the world of motivating people.
If I can comment just quickly here, I mean, it's not really fair to them. We're taking this one thing,
I agree. Yep.
looking at it and saying, gee, this isn't giving us enough information. Well, of course it's not really, but yeah, it's more descriptive as opposed to what is it telling us about behaviorally what can be done, or what will actually move an organization or a group of people toward higher performance, other than what we already kind of know in the field of organizational development or design, and that you've got to get people engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And to that point, to what Kathy was saying, was interesting to me is a lot of times these things, and again, I'm not saying it in a judgmental way, but a lot of times these things aren't, they're from the organization's perspective and not from the people's perspective, right? So it's kind of like the same thing in healthcare when we talk about patient-centered. Well, they're not consulting patients in terms of designing these systems and processes. So how is it patient-centered? The patient's the one that's suffering from this so-called patient-centered, value-driven care, whole care. All the terms are out there, but in the actual design of the systems and processes, they're not consulting the constituents that actually go through it. And I guarantee these kinds of same thing happens when these kinds of things, these dynamics comes out. That's a challenge that I see in leadership. You know, often leadership is about what, it doesn't, account for who's creating the environment in these kinds of policies that's affecting how people perform. And so
Oh.
then there's less accountability for that. And then it goes back to the what again, but you're not addressing who. So it's not a holistic approach, I guess, for me, enough. But again, we don't have all the context of what they're looking at in terms of data and information, but it just seems like something's missing for me. I can understand the whole picture.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me, if I may, pipe in a couple of
Please.
things that may help to satisfy a little bit of that you were talking about. I'm looking at this and seeing a very interesting exploration tool with a person. This line that goes from diagonally down in the middle. I really see dysfunction versus function on each side of that line, right?
Right.
Where you're at exactly is not so important as that you're within the trend. You're not an outlier someplace, right? That the movement I see very similar to you take a child and you introduce them to a piano, right? Not interested. Little external motivation, right? You get them to just sit there, plink, 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 right? And then you start requiring them to follow some process. And at some point they get good enough that they're feeling good about it and asking for something harder. They're
Yeah.
aligned,
Right. They can play a song. And
right?
now they go like, oh, this matches my values because maybe playing a song impressed some friends or whatever the case may be.
And then they try their own composition.
Yeah, exactly. And then they decide, oh no, I can create some, I can learn a new song. So I think you've given a very good example of how that happens.
And now they're at a friend's house and there's a piano and they just go over and are magnetically drawn to it
Yeah,
because
exactly.
do it and enjoy what they get out of it. Now you can look at the same thing at the healthcare industry and say, you know what? 20 years ago, nobody was interested in the quality of healthcare. 30 years ago, maybe. I don't know. But I remember that it was used when I was in quality as healthcare, if they had the same quality of service as we do in other areas, how much better they'd be, right? Because of all the misdiagnoses and and the mistreatment of people and so forth. So they were not interested. And then there were some lawsuits and they started getting interested.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting.
So
They're interested in practice or by the practice of what they're interested in doesn't equate. So although they're interested in it, it still doesn't equate because in other words, it's still based on transaction, not transformation. And there's a difference in that foundation from the very beginning.
Aligned and integrated stage.
Yeah.
It's still being imposed.
All right, let me show you something else. We're coming up to the top of the hour. This book is available on Amazon, and it was actually published in 2017. The lion's share of the reviews, some 64% of the reviews are 5-star. I never believe 5-star reviews because everyone I know who has written a book has contacted all their friends and family members and colleagues and said, "Go review my book." So I'm get on the Amazon top seller kind of list. And so I always wonder that. I like reading the 3 stars, the 4 stars, something like that. So I've just kind of isolated the 3 stars just to see what it says. And so this one just says there are better books on the topic. Having said this, I find it an oversimplification to think that one can always find ways to align employees' goals and the company goals. So they're telling us a little bit about what it does. And the last part covers some case studies about people who are known to help people self-motivate. By far, this was the weakest part of the book. And it goes on there. This one comes up and says, great concept, but a mediocre solution. And so it keeps repeating the premise in different forms, never really provides solutions or guidance to accomplish. Okay, but very repetitive advice. Get to the intrinsic motivations. 3 stars. I've read 50 boring pages. The more I read, the harder it gets to continue. Good for reading, not for listening. So that's good to say. The content is decent in the book, but the narration is brutally hard to listen to. And so, they go on, but I kind of find those sorts of things interested. I really don't know that people learn all that much from 5-star reviews, but in all fairness, 87% of people gave it a 4 or 5-star. And that means they find value. And so good for them. That's really, really wonderful. Who knows what these 2-stars said? Difficult read, too technical, not user friendly. I thought there'd be more than that. And then one person, 1-star. What did they say? Not worth the money, told me nothing new. The review is for yeah, whatever. I was going to buy this, but I found an interview with the author on some HR related site that allowed me to make yeah. Anyway, so there you go. So if you think it's worth a deeper dive, go ahead and get it. And if you do that, please let us know what they mean by quality. So we can do a little more fair assessment. But, again, why I feel comfortable doing these kinds of discussions and integrations is because they are trying to describe some facet of the creature we find most fascinating, and that's a human. And they're looking at one specific aspect of it, and we're trying to look at everything that's on it. So I think that we can see that there is enough meaning, enough value, enough parallel that I believe that this model is reasonably, or if not quite accurate, quite useful. That doesn't surprise me. It's coming out of Blanchard. Yet I do believe that it is, as is the case with the majority of things that are being released out there by anybody and everybody, it tends to be a rather simple kind of a thing. So yeah. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Now, next time around, let me just quickly tell you what what Chris also sent over. Hopefully I didn't close the pages. I've been clicking on everything here. One moment, please. La da 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 da. Here it is. Nope, that's not it. Here it is. Nope, that's not it. Just a second. Oh, piles upon piles of things. But Chris sent over an article about these different tensions that leaders have to manage. And the author wrote about these 7 different tensions. I don't know what I did with it, but I'll definitely have it to share with you guys, obviously, when we speak next. But it really just say that the traditional way of leading and managing people and the modern way of leading and managing people are at odds with one another. And that the fact that they're at odds with one another creates a certain tension. And how can someone who's tied more into the traditional way of looking at things, how can they move towards the more advanced thing? Well, as I was looking at that, I went, well, all 7 of these map to the change grid. So let's see if we can use it to say, where does traditional management leadership live on the change grid? And where does this more, they want to say, evolved or more timely, more progressive kind of thing done? So next time around, let's take a look at these 7 different tensions that exist within the world of leadership, and we can take it from there. Thoughts, comments?
Thanks.
See if you,
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
no, I was just gonna say, I'm dropping that link in the chat.
Oh, you have it?
Yes.
Now, you didn't send it to me though, right? Wasn't that Chris who sent it? So, or did you send it?
Correct. That was Chris. He sent it in a text to you and I.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And so what I'm going to do, okay, so Tim has just put it in there, but every leader needs to navigate these 7 tensions. Just keep in mind their use of the word tension is more, it's not what we mean by tension, but it still is going to overlay well enough. So there's a tension between the expert versus the learner, etc. So I thought it'd be interesting to say, well, I like what they're saying about that, but where does the expert live versus where does the learner live on the change grid? Where's the constant versus the adapter? Where's the tactician versus the visionary? So I think that's going to be a very interesting opportunity for us to look at different regions on the change grid and see how many of these more traditional leadership behaviors plot and where do these more current or whatever. What word are they using? Traditional versus emerging, the emerging approach. Okay, anyway,
Interesting.
that's what we'll be looking at coming out of Harvard Business Review. And so that's what's going on next time. So with that, thank you all very much for joining in today. Have a wonderful, wonderful next couple of days, and we'll talk again on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.